What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we're going to continue with part 3 of the series of missing third-party companies. Have you seen them? Can you call someone? Can you help? Their parents are worried. They're out in the streets. It's cold. It's winter. It's blistering blunder. If you see something, say something, right? But it gives me an opportunity to kind of tackle some of the unsung heroes and historical components of all of this stuff and hobby that don't really get a whole lot of fanfare because they don't really have the longevity, but they do have some impressive pieces and some pretty notable contributions along the way. But before we do that, we do have to do a little house cleaning. So last week on the state of third party, a lot of people brought up Make Toys, and you're absolutely right, and I missed that as an opportunity. I should have chimed in on Make Toys, but I did get a little busy bee buzzing in my ear telling me that the Coneheads are coming, like confirmation that it's not just talk. So that's a good thing. And then I think the only other thing that I gotta clear up right away anyway is the purple potato. People were talking about the ab crunch that I missed in the rocker. I didn't miss the rocker. I talked about it later. You gotta watch the whole video. Secondly, the ab crunch. Yeah, man, look, if the materials feel better, I'll push things to a more of a limit, but these don't belong to me. I'm trying to see what I can see. I don't think it was one of my own criticisms even either. Like, you know, you gotta give me a break. Sorry. Of all of the problems that face that particular piece, the ab crunch, not one of them. Doesn't fix anything about how I feel about it. Doesn't hurt anything about how I feel about it. And you're right, though. I did miss it. Just like you missed the other 30 people that commented it. We all make mistakes. It's okay. And then I think with that, we can get right into today's topic. So we're going to cover like 3 or 4 companies, time permitting, and I'll try to interject with some personal stuff along the way. But with that, let's get started.
And we'll put out our first APB on SXS, which is a company that has a relatively long history, but it initially started with a bunch of upgrade sets. There were Gatling gun weapons and shields and swords and all sorts of typical fanfare for your pre-existing Hasbro stuff. And to be fair, it kind of was lumped in one of those categories alongside like Dr. Wu as like a participant, but not really a meaningful one. A fluffy one, which is fine. They have their place as well. That's not a knock as much as it is a classification. But then they announced what I believe was their first full-scale figure, which was a masterpiece scaled Gears. Now, the only competition at the time was the iGear one, I believe, which was less than favorable. But this one had a little bit more promise, but yet was a little bit busy, even by the standard of the day. But when people got it is when they realized just how bad it was made, which is to say, really, really bad. It was awful. It was perhaps the worst third-party figure I had messed with at the time. But that didn't prevent them from putting a swerve out as well, I believe. But that may have been an extremely limited release because I'm not sure I actually ever saw one. Now, shortly after this, they became kind of synonymous with KFC. And if memory serves, and I could be wrong about this, it's because they started announcing upgrade sets for KFC products before the KFC products were even released. And then people started putting it together that the plastic sort of seemed familiar. The general build quality seemed relatively familiar. And many people believe that they were a subsidiary of KFC. At the very least, they had some sort of business working relationship with them because they were designing products for them without that product even being available. But to most people's surprise, the next release that they actually produced that was a full-fledged figure was an IDW-styled Blur called Overclocking, which to this day is still a pretty impressive figure. The engineering quirks that the previous Gears had encountered had been fixed. There was a sophistication and a level of professionalism in this piece that hadn't been there in pieces prior. We often give MMC credit as being the only producer of IDW-styled chug figures in their lane, but that's not entirely true because SXS was definitely trying to participate. However, what may have been their undoing was that they went toe-to-toe with them over a hot rod figure. Now, I'll be honest, I went with MMCs as well, and I went with MMC due to their reputation, and passed on SXS due to its reputation. And I'm still okay with my choice ultimately, but in hindsight, I will tell you, I think the SXS looks better. I think the MMC is made better, but I think the SXS is a better looking figure and a more accurate looking figure. That being said, this may have been their undoing because the last thing I believe that we heard from them in terms of a new mold was a tease of Nautica, and I feel like that was at least in 2018, and we haven't really heard a peep from them since. So if you happen to see them, call somebody. Their parents are worried. Next up on our list is a company with perhaps not as much fanfare, but does have a few impressive products, and that is Before and After. Now, I think this company largely got its name because it was focusing on upgrade kits, and we first really got wind of them and made an impact by shoulder cannons for the masterpiece Datsun brothers. And a lot of their promotional image literally showed you the before and after. But the figure that they made the most impact with, and I still have in my collection because I think he does a pretty good job, is the Six Sigma. This was a third-party version of Six Gun that was like larger scale, but transformed into weapons that were compatible with your Hasbro Metroplex. The materials were good, it was well sculpted, well painted, and still kind of continued their tradition of upgrades, but in a far more interesting way than what we had seen prior.
Also, with Before and After Six Sigma, one thing that's important to note is that they did a black arm version and a red arm version to kind of give homage to the Japanese and the American design. So just like a little, I mean, yes, it's a double down, double your money and all that, and I get it, but it's also some fanfare in there. Like, there are people that really only connect with the Japanese version and vice versa with the American version. So like, I thought that was a thoughtful thing. Also, keep in mind that at the time, they're a relatively unknown company, and they're also going up against TFC at the time, which is a more well-known company, but their reputation is sort of always in flux. So, I mean, no small feat either way for them. And theirs was definitely better than the TFC one, in my opinion.
And then the only other thing that I know of from them is their Engineer General. Now, the reason why this one is interesting to me, I have this in my collection. I was gifted this by John Garinger, and he sits proudly in every Sit Down Saturday. But what's interesting to me about this is I heard about this early on and remember hearing that it was related to Make Toys. So I don't know if this company is at all related to Make Toys or not, but I heard that specifically about this. So when I saw it eventually come out under the branding of Before and After, which didn't really continue their upgrade series, but didn't really fit into anything Make Toys was doing, it always bewildered me a bit. But anyway, I think this company did have a brighter future than they ended up having. That being said, if you see them, contact your authorities. Now, next on the list is Bold Forms. This is a company that kind of came out swinging during the Megatron Wars when XTB and Make Toys and seemingly everyone at the time was making a Megatron, and they threw their hat in the ring. Now, what made theirs different was the gun was a different style of weapon, very modern, very realistic, but the scaling and stuff remained the same, and the kind of aesthetics in bot mode remained the same to more of a G1 aesthetic. Not necessarily right on the money, but I think definitely close enough and in the ballpark. This came out, and the materials had the reputation of being problematic, as did the engineering feat. I'm not sure that Megatron is the best choice to sort of tee the ball up on, but perhaps something that comes later down the line after you've gotten your feet wet a bit. And there's a story I like to tell in regard to them, specifically every time this particular figure comes up.
I've told this story many times, but at a TF Con, the Bold Forms people, it was just a husband and wife, like a couple. And they came up to me at my booth and like introduced themselves and said how much they liked the content that I made, and said that they would love for me to review their piece, but they were afraid of what I would say about it. And I told them if they were afraid to not send it to me because they were such nice, kind people that the last thing I would want to do is have any negative impact on their business. If they sent it to me, I would have done it, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to get a hold of it to kind of just rip apart. So it was like I mentioned it because I've mentioned it numerous times, but it was because it was a growing experience for me. It was a kind of life-changing in the way that I approached this stuff experience for me of, like, you know, putting faces to companies and seeing the direct impact it could have on people. And, you know, so like there's a give and take to that, right? There's me saying something negative about something and then it crushing this like just homemade kind of couple, husband and wife project. And then there's also, you know, us who work and spend our hard-earned money on things that we want to be good. So there's like, I don't know, it taught me something about some balance there that perhaps I wasn't seeing before.
But it didn't stop them. They also had a Motormaster called Lone Wolf. Now, the gimmick to this was that it was kind of MP scaled, had a very almost toy look to it, G1 toy look, but also would double as the body component for your Combiner Wars Menasor, which was a complete train wreck. And it did make it look better, to be fair. Meanwhile, the trailer was attached to the truck for vehicle mode, So the vehicle mode looked better than the Combiner Wars one as well, and it kind of took a shot at a Masterpiece scaled bot. And this came out, and I don't think this had much fanfare as well, unfortunately. I never had the opportunity to mess with it, but it wasn't well received. It also had a base mode, if I recall correctly. And then I believe their last tease was that of a breakdown, and it seemed like they were going to try to do all of the Stunticons for their Minotaur and replace the Combiner Wars set entirely. I think this got to prototype stage, but never really got past that. And unfortunately, that's the last we've ever seen of them, but I hope to see them in person again one day. Very pleasant people. And then our last one for today is the story of Omnigonics and what basically is only Spin-Out, which was their take on a Sunstreaker. Now, you have to keep in mind at the time that the only other Masterpiece scaled Sunstreaker that was available was Bad Cube, and the Takara one certainly wasn't a thought or a hit on the radar. And people had mixed feelings about the Bad Cube one. It looked pretty good, however, the transformation was a bear, as were many Bad Cube products, and the toy wasn't a whole lot of fun. So people were looking for another possible alternative, and Omnigonics started teasing a Sunstreaker that many thought would be a plausible one. And honestly, even as I'm looking at the two of them together, I gotta tell you, that Bad Cube Sunstreaker still looks really good to me. But neither here nor there. Now, there's a lot of rumors and speculation surrounding and regarding this, so just keep in mind that when I am talking about it, I'm simply talking about the things that I've heard, no real evidence to back it up, just things that were kind of kicked around. The word on the proverbial streets, as it were, was that Omnigonics had made a deal with KFC's factory to produce Spin-Out. But at some point during the process, were told that they were going to be over budget, but they'd already agreed and locked in to sort of a concept of what the price would be, which may have already been a stretch for them. And with them being over budget and hearing what the new budget would be, they weren't able to meet that goal financially. So instead, they made sacrifices and settlements both in materials and assembly with the factory, and as a result, what we got was a Spin-Out that wasn't truly produced in the fashion that Omnigonics had imagined or had hoped for. And the backlash from the community after receiving and dealing with this product was enough to pretty much sink this boat forever. Now, I will tell you, I still have this figure, and I will tell you how I got it in a bit of a personal story.
So, years ago at a party, Robert D was here and removed my Tiger Tracks from my review space and replaced it with an Omnigonics, and then hid my Tiger Tracks in the house. And I went on reviewing and comparing size comparison-wise with Omnigonics for probably a month before I realized that it wasn't Tiger Tracks. So, to this day, I still have that Omnigonics sitting in my display area, just in case I ever need it, I guess. But little bit of personal Skullface history with Omnigonics.
However, I must also say that materials withstanding, I'm not sure that a bright future was in the future for this company under any circumstances. I don't think the sculpt was ever there. I don't think the proportions were ever there. And of course, with time, anything can grow and get better. I'm just not sure if they were in a place, at least a starting place, to really get to a point where they could compete in today's market in the G1 Masterpiece field. Now, I say that to say this. I'm not sure why a lot of these companies don't take less ambitious chances with gaping holes in a lot of collectors' shelves. Companies starting out tackling characters like Megatron or Sunstreaker, to me, seems far more risky, even though the character is more dependable, than, say, tackling a Wingspan or a Pounce, which might not take the same amount of engineering, but people would be a lot more lenient of, especially for your first effort. But anyway, in typical missing third-party company fashion, if you see something, say something.
So yeah, there's another topic surrounding this about what companies do after they get out of Transformers regarding third party, because we do know of a couple now that have kind of left third party Transformers and moved into other ventures. That's a video that I'm working on, but I need to do a little bit more digging and find a few more examples before I can really have a video that's worth kind of sitting down for Saturday morning to watch. And I think that's it for today. You guys be safe. You guys be well. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care. Big reviews next week.